Okay, so we're diving into some pretty urgent analysis today.
Yeah.
We're looking at what Anthony Scaramucci called just a wild start to 2026.
Wild is one word for it. He said, and this is a quote, that a year transpired of history in just the first 8 days.
A year and 8 days.
Yeah.
That really sets the stage.
It does. And that's why we need this deep dive. The sources are pointing to this massive surge of executive aggression, a sense of lawlessness, really. Our mission here is to unpack all that.
Right. So we're talking about the flexing in Venezuela, the political survival games inside the administration.
And crucially, the history that allowed it to happen. We have to look beyond the headlines. We have to look at the historical weakness that empowered this whole phenomenon.
The imperial presidency,
Yeah.
Arthur Schlesinger's term.
Exactly. That structural failure is the key. It's the only way to understand why this current chaos feels so unchecked.
So let's jump right in with Venezuela. I mean, that was the most dramatic move, right?
Yeah.
You had 5 Republican senators who actually joined Democrats to oppose authorizing troops.
Right. Which on the surface looks like Congress pushing back.
But Scaramucci just laughed it off. He called it an ineffectual show vote.
And that the president would just steamroll it.
Yeah.
And the reason he was so sure of that really gets to the core of the imperial presidency.
This wasn't a snap decision.
Not at all. According to his sources, this was pre-planned, meticulously. 6 weeks before it even happened, Scaramucci was predicting the administration would launch a strike.
And he said they'd create a pretext, right? Something about narco-terrorism.
Bring about narco-terrorism and then, quote, snatch Maduro. It was all laid out.
So what was the official story? The one they sold to the public?
Said the usual. Venezuela is a satellite rogue state, a hub for narco-terrorism, drug trafficking. You know, all the previous administrations, Bush, Obama, Biden, they all used sanctions.
But they never went in militarily.
No, they avoided that. This administration, though, they saw it as a chance to step into what they called the Noriega realm.
But the real reasons were different.
Completely different. The official rationale was just cover. The real pitch made to the executive branch was about oil, pure and simple.
Venezuela has, some of the biggest reserves in the world?
Over 300 billion barrels. The sources claim that by seizing those reserves and then, combining them with U.S. and Canadian oil,
the U.S. would suddenly control a massive chunk of the world's supply.
roughly 50%, 50.
Wow, 50%. That changes the entire global balance of power.
It fundamentally shifts it. The analysis was that this would put a big herd on Russia and the Middle East. It just completely alters the geostrategic footprint of the petrodollar.
It's the ultimate power play.
And there was another piece. They wanted to stop Venezuela from selling its oil in Chinese currency, in renminbi. That's a huge threat to dollar dominance.
And of course, you can't forget the personal angle.
The possible self-enrichment angle for the president himself. It's always there.
So you pull all that together, the resources, the currency war, the personal gain, and the sources basically say, forget the official story. This is just
Outright imperialism.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the plan for after Maduro wasn't about democracy, was it?
Not even close. The sources talk about a planned interregnum. Delcy Rodriguez, who is already part of the regime, would replace Maduro for 24 to 30 months.
Why? Just to keep things stable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Pure stabilization to attract foreign investment. It's about restructuring the resources. It's transactional control, not a democratic transition. Which brings us right back to the central question. How can this happen? How can the president pull off something so huge with Congress just putting on an ineffectual show vote?
Why is Congress so, as the source puts it, slavish?
Yeah. Where did this weakness come from? And for that, you really have to go back in time.
Back to Vietnam.
Right after the Vietnam War. See, members of Congress who voted for the war, they got voted out. They paid a political price for a tough, consequential vote.
So they learned the wrong lesson from it.
They learned a lesson in political survival. And their solution was, well, it was kind of genius in a catastrophic way. They decided the key to keeping their seats was to avoid ever taking a consequential vote again.
So they just gave their power away.
They literally set up procedures to make themselves weak. They ceded emergency powers to the president, gave broad authorizations for military police actions, anything to avoid a hard vote that could get them fired back home.
They outsourced all the political risk to the White House.
That's the perfect way to put it. And over decades, that built the entire framework for the imperial presidency.
And this administration isn't just using that power, it's weaponizing it. It's using the very rules Congress set up to flex on them, to cross lines other presidents wouldn't.
The mindset from people close to the president is apparently just, tell me a rule and I will break that rule. It's about self-enrichment, attention, and pity. Well, they say he enjoys the angst it causes.
So what about the Republicans who see this happening? Scaramucci talks about his private conversations with them.
And their reasoning is something else. They basically say, look, we have to align with the power holder now. It's a short-term calculation.
But they think they can control it in the end.
That's the gamble, a catastrophic one. They tell him they'll only step in and use their Article 1 powers if he tries to, stop an election or declare martial law.
Wait, so they see the Venezuela action, the tariffs, the ICE stuff, they see all that as minor things.
Minor things, that's the quote. They think they can tolerate all of this for political gain now and that they have this imaginary red line he won't cross.
But isn't that just guaranteeing a constitutional crisis? If he's willing to push this far now, why would he ever stop at their supposed line in the sand?
It seems like a terrible bet, but their survival depends on believing they can wait him out, that he'll be gone in a few years and they can just, put everything back to normal. It's a bet I don't think many historians would take.
Okay, let's zoom in on the people in this orbit, starting with the president himself. There's always talk about his health, his stamina.
Right. And the observers say he's still pretty sharp, but also looks very, very tired. There's this weird limp people speculate about.
But the sources bring up a psychological explanation for his resilience.
They do. They call it narcissistic detachment. And it's key. You know how other leaders seem to age a decade and 4 years?
Yeah, the stress just physically wears them down.
But because he's a full-on narcissist, as the source says, he treats people like objects. He doesn't internalize the stress of the job in the same way. He's emotionally armored.
So that armor lets him just keep going, even with the late-night calls and the constant chaos.
It lets him thrive in an environment that would burn out a normal, empathetic person almost instantly. It's a very dark kind of political sustainability.
And what about the people orbiting him? Let's talk about J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio. Rubio, we hear, is kind of on and off the list.
He's not fully trusted, no. That goes way back to the Little Marco feud. And even though he's gained some power by aligning himself so closely, he's apparently just destroyed his reputation among his colleagues. He lied to everybody in the private congressional cloakroom. He broke what they call a code of conduct among pirates.
A code of conduct among pirates.
Oh,
I love that.
right.
So what does that mean, practically?
It means you can betray the people outside the ship, but you never, ever betray the crew. You don't break internal deals for your own gain. Once you do that, you're done. No one will ever trust you as a power broker again.
So even if the president finds him useful, his career inside Congress is basically finished.
Among his peers, yes. He's lost that crucial trust.
And then there's J.D. Vance. Scaramucci's description of him is, it is absolutely brutal.
It's maybe the most brutal assessment in the whole batch of sources. He called him a colonoscope of Trump's ass and said his political future is over.
And he was missing from that big Venezuela press conference.
Conspicuously absent, and that was probably his strategy, right? To keep a little distance in case it all goes south.
But that's not going to work.
Not a chance. The source says the president hates Vance in this deep Shakespearean way, and he'll eventually put Vance in the wood chipper because he needs all the spotlight for himself. Any rising star is a threat.
Which connects to this whole atmosphere of pain and cruelty that seems to drive everything.
It does. Look at that story about the ICE killing in Minnesota. A completely disproportionate use of force that resulted in a death. That's the toxicity flowing downward.
The fish stinks from the head down.
Exactly. And the little minions in places like Homeland Security, they feel this pressure to get rough because they're afraid of losing their jobs, their pensions. If they don't match the aggression coming from the top, it's fear-based compliance.
Yeah.
And if you pull the lens back even further, you see what this is doing to America's place in the world. All this arbitrariness, capriciousness, impetuosity.
The random rhetoric about war with Cuba or Denmark.
Yeah. It's not just noise. The Chinese government sees this as a windfall.
A windfall. How does American chaos help China?
Because China is winning the argument on stability. When the U.S. acts this erratically, our allies start looking for predictability. And even if they don't like the Chinese system, their multilateral agreements are stable. They're predictable.
And predictability is better than chaos.
Overwhelmingly.
Yeah.
Allies are drifting toward the predictable system regardless of who is running it. They just can't deal with the nonsense that's going on with the Americans.
Which brings us to Scaramucci's final and maybe most chilling warning, which is that this is not going to get better. It's going to get much, much worse.
He predicts the president has maybe 6 more months before more Republicans start breaking away. But if he hasn't checked, the path leads to great destruction and nihilism.
Nihilism. And he makes a really disturbing historical comparison.
He does. He compares the president's potential endgame to Hitler's. When Hitler knew the Thousand-Year Reich was over, he didn't just surrender.
No, he ordered the destruction of Germany itself.
The electrical grid, the coal mines, everything. He wanted to blow the whole thing up because if he couldn't have it, no one could.
So the goal isn't even about winning anymore. It's about ensuring no one else can win after him.
That's the analysis, that the president quietly does not want the Republicans to win that election.
Why?
So he can claim they were nobody before him and they're nobody after him. It's all about making sure he remains the only character that matters in the story.
And people still flock to him. They risk everything to be in that orbit.
It's that allure of power. The sources call it Ptolemaic fever.
Ptolemaic fever.
Yeah, like the old model of the solar system where the Earth was the center. You get so attracted to the light and heat of the celebrity leader, you think he's the center of the universe. You start making compromises just for that access. And you don't even realize you have the fever until you've already burned up.
So, after all this, what does this all mean for you, the listener? We've traced how decades of congressional weakness built the imperial presidency. We've seen how that's being used for this aggressive imperialism in Venezuela.
We've also broken down the dangerous dynamics at play, the detached narcissism at the center, and these compromise figures like Rubio and Vance just trying to survive in that orbit.
But the final challenge the sources highlight is the opposition, or the lack of one.
Right. The Democratic Party is described as being in disarray. Until they can find a transformational coalition builder, someone who can actually unite people, there's just not going to be a forceful rebuttal to any of this.
So here's the final thought. If the sources are right, if this brand of chaos and authoritarianism is truly tied to just one personality, what happens next? What happens to his core base, the immovable people, the ones who would follow him if he shot people on Fifth Avenue? What happens when that nihilist leader finally leaves the stage? So what movement, what ideology is even left behind?